This is the Good Fire Podcast. Stories of Indigenous fire stewardship, cultural and social empowerment, and environmental integrity. Hey everybody, welcome back to Good Fire Season 2. This is episode 7 now. And as Amy mentioned last week, we are broadcasting a panel discussion and a bit of a recording through a conference on cultural burning and good fire. And I got to listen in, learn a lot of cool stuff. It's a bunch of early career researchers, as they call it. Some of them are
there's PhD candidates and postdocs.
So yeah, a bunch of them are PhD candidates. And we got to hear their experience, some of their stories, and some of the things that they really wanted to highlight from their research and their work. So that was really cool. Amy, I'll let you introduce the bunch. There's 5 of them.
Yeah, sure. So first we want to just thank the International Association of Wildland Fire for sharing the recording with us. I told Michael Robinson, who's the executive director, that I would give a bit of background on the International Association of Wildland Fire. So I'm actually a board member. So I think I'm their first Indigenous board member. And it's, for me, they're just such a progressive organization. I really like the work that they're doing. And Toddy, who's their former president, and Joaquin, who's their current president. I just think that they've always been all about like equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so they're a professional membership association. I'm reading this, so I don't want to get it wrong. So dedicated to uniting the global wildland fire community. We are uniquely positioned as an independent organization whose membership includes experts in all aspects of wildland fire management. IAWF independence and breadth of global membership expertise allows it to offer a neutral forum for the consideration of important, at times controversial, wildland fire issues. Our unique membership and organization allows the IAWF to creatively apply a full range of wildland fire knowledge to perform its stated mission. So it's a great organization. You can go on their website, iawfonline.org, if you're interested in learning more, signing up to be a member. They honestly host the best events. Like, their conferences are outstanding, and they're helping us to host the Wildland Fire Canada conference that's coming up from October 31st to November 4th, 2022, in case anyone's listening later than 2022, right. In Edmonton, in Treaty 6 territory. So that should be a great event. And so this panel that we're going to be talking about, it was from the Fire and Climate Conference that happened in Pasadena at the end of May. And so the title of the panel was Partnerships in Fire Management, Supporting Indigenous Leadership in Cultural Burning. And for me, when I listened to it, I actually got teary, I'll lamely say, because it was just young women who are, and Will as well, who are just absolutely passionate about wildland fire. And I don't know, for me, it was when I was doing my PhD, there weren't groups like this coming up. And I just found it so inspirational. And really, for me, it felt like a return to matriarchal fire. So, where women are leading. And I think that that's in many of our communities, that they're matriarchal. Oh, God, why is that word so hard to say? Anyways.
It's a hard word. They shouldn't have made that word like that.
Yeah, no kidding. Anyways, matriarchal. Yeah.
No, you got an extra CH in there. It's matriarchal, I think. Is it?
I don't Oh God, let's edit this out.
Women.
Yeah. So matriarchal. That's right. Okay. So that they're matriarchal societies where, women are leaders and often the decision makers. And so for me, that was just really exciting to see them all involved and just so passionate about fire. So the panelists are Melinda, Carly, Nina, Denise, and Will. And they'll be introducing themselves more in depth during the panel, so we won't do it here. And then the moderator was Carolyn, so thanks to her as well. So, yeah, I guess that's it for background. We'll let them take it away.
Yeah, here we go.
Thank you, Carolyn. Daute, Melinda Adams, hello, my name is Melinda. I belong to the San Carlos Apache tribe, and before I begin, I would like to share part of my positionality, self-reflective exercise that researchers can participate in when engaging in co-creative strategies with Native peoples. So I approach this research by holding and cherishing partnerships with cultural practitioners, and I seek to protect them always through permission and consent, led with gojo shiji, as we say in Apache, in a good way. So as a Native person, many of our lessons are shared through storytelling, and I use it in my research as an analytic, particularly with fire, as fire plays a prominent role in many tribes' creation stories, prophecy stories, and lessons in land keeping. And so I'd like to share a story of cultural fire with you all today. So in March of 2022, a small section of the Cache Creek Conservancy located in Woodland, California, called the Tending and Gathering Garden, was chosen as the site for one of the first ever cultural fire workshops with on-the-ground CAL FIRE firefighters, policymakers, and administratives. Nearly 100 agency representatives took a step back from fire suppression and instead watched, listened, and learned how cultural fire demonstrations differ from prescribed or controlled fire. The day concluded with our first ever wetland island burn, concentrating on restoring the plant tule, which is tended for cordage and used to make canoes. And ecologically speaking, this plant helps filter impurities within watersheds. These characteristics are important to me as a Native person with close relationships with these plants, but also as a trained ecologist and environmental scientist, as my research concentrates on, one, the restoration of culturally and ecologically significant plants through cultural fire, and two, the restoration of environmentally degraded soils through long-term monitoring of bio and chemical responses post-cultural fire. This two-prong approach leads to broader implications, including the use of cultural fire, or as we've heard at least 3 times in this conference, cultural fire for the use of long-term carbon storage and potential for water holding capacity, both of which pushes forward climate solutions, but most importantly, a cultural reunification with fire. So back to my cultural fire story in the CAL FIRE workshop. Having been asked by the elders, and the title picture, I apologize I didn't walk through, but I was volunteered to light the first fire of the island burn, ceremoniously started with a bundled tule torch. The first fire carried each direction, beginning in the east to form a fire break, allowing it to burn in a circular pattern, heading south, west, and then finally full circle to the north. Our cultural practitioners and I were adamant that no fuels, gas, or machines be used in order to stay true to how our ancestors tended and carried fire. The pictures on the right, taken 2 weeks apart, capture the incredible regeneration of tule. A picture of our little island burn even captured the attention of CNN News, whose piece on cultural fire in California was headlined by a drone shot of our burn. The picture to the left. In remarking about how the day went, one of the elders shared with me, "I feel so good about today and what was done here. In our way, we burn the things that we want back, and we want that tule back." And so it is possible for cultural fire to be demonstrated in partnerships with agencies if these relationships, communications, and actions are rooted in collaboration, consultation, and most importantly, tribal consent. Our cultural practitioners have contributed to shifts in statewide fire policy as well as climate mitigation plans, undoing some of what colonialism has taken away over the span of at least 200 years. The sharing of our place-based ways of knowing is reflected in powerful moments of self-determination. Our peoples wanted to make sure these lessons were passed along. It's a lesson for us all and how we can all move from being good relatives to good ancestors, reminded of something Crystal Colden said yesterday about seventh generation thinking, the thinking of our futures, who now bear the burden of climate change and climate solutions. So, in closing, as we collectively strive for climate solutions, we proposition that Native peoples, through fire stewardship, provide powerful examples of time-tested climate intelligence and ecological resilience. So with that, in Apache, we say Onondaga, and normally I would clap. Onondaga. And, I'm sorry. I do one clap. I clap. And it says, the story, it continues. And so, Ashont, thank you. Now I'm done. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Melinda. Now we'd like to invite Carly Dominguez up. Thank you.
Hatu. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here. It's good to see you. Just taking a moment to recognize that we made it here. I have a lot to say, but I'm a mom, and this is the first time I traveled with my baby. So, and she's paneling as well. And I'm just gonna also start like Melinda with a little bit about my positionality. So I come to this work first as a community member, a woman of color, someone that has to participate here in these American norms, but I'm also a member of our Chumash community and our Mexican community. And I have the responsibility to be a good relative, which means good relations, and this looks different and manifests differently in all types of places, right? There's not one size fits all, but that's the goal. And you see a picture here of me in the Cowlitz River. I'm so excited. I heard throughout the talks people talking about the importance of fire connected to water health. And this is one of the main reasons why I do the work I do. So my daughter can swim in our rivers. This is in Cowlitz and up in Washington. And I'm from Chumash territory. And all of our rivers are dams. So we have to travel even to swim. But this is one of the main reasons I do the work I do. And to have physical, mental, spiritual, emotional health. Let's see. And I also want to say that this fire tending and this water care, this good relations is part of a lifestyle. It's not just work. So whenever I walk, wherever I go, I'm always considering the indigenous people where I am. And so with that in mind, I just want to recognize and thank the Tongva and Tataviam. We're on their land right now. This is where they work, live, and exist. And there's a lot of other American Indian nations and indigenous communities here as well, but this area has been stewarded by the Tongva and the Tataviam for a long time. Okay. As you can imagine, as a member of the indigenous community and the academic community, I do a lot of work. And I grew up learning about fire as a time to come together and feed our family. Our family uses red oak to eat and celebrate. So fire for me has always been good. It's been good fire. So I don't use the term cultural fire or cultural burns unless I really have to. For me, I have an ethos of good fire. So fire is good. It's a little bit different from what you might see on the news when it's like, fire, which is also understandable, but it's just a little different. And I think because I spend a lot of time walking the land, it's like not so surprising that there's fires because you kind of walk around and there's a lot of fuel everywhere. Anyways, I'm still being trained, so I'm so happy that you all got to see Melinda's presentation. I was also participating in that burn. That's one of the places where I'm trained, is at these cultural burn trainings. Also being trained by Chairman Ron Good, and we both, Sonora and I, participated in the cultural burn in Carolyn. Also, Professor Beth Rose Middleton, Elizabeth Azuz, and Carly Tex are some of the people who are training me. So these are people who are part of other indigenous communities, but we have our Indigenous Burn Network so that we communicate about what we're doing. And right here, these slides come from a year-long fellowship that I participated in with the Southwest Cask, and I was a social scientist researcher amongst biological and physical scientists. So, I was so grateful to my colleagues in this fellowship because they were really open and wanted to do stakeholder engagement, and they were understanding and supportive that Indigenous people's knowledge is harbored maybe in other ways, maybe not necessarily by the scientific measures that they were used to, and they were open to learning and wanted to hear, because they could also perceive that Indigenous people have this knowledge, but they're not necessarily presenting it in the same ways that their biological and physical scientist members were presenting the data. And so we went through I shared their openness because I think that's really critical and key and to the discussion process. And so we started engaging in conversations with a few Indigenous people in some of the areas that we wanted to work with. So it was the Apache in the Mogollon Rim and then also in the Klamath Basin. And the way the conversations went, we ended up working with the Karuk Department of Natural Resources there, with a young woman named Vicki Preston to think about how could we present, Karuk voices in this critical time. We knew that Indigenous people don't need us to speak on their behalf. They can speak on their own behalf. And that comes from, in academia, we have Indigenous story work and the Indigenous research agenda, a few methodologies in social sciences and Native American and Indigenous studies. Those methodologies support Indigenous voice. So that's one of the ways social scientists can participate in these kinds of research studies, is to support Indigenous voices by using these methodologies. And so what we came up with, and the pictures you see here, are pictures that were taken during the Intentional Fire podcast. And so we came together and decided that a podcast would be a great way would be the right way that Karuk people could talk about their knowledge. And this particular fire podcast is also related to a policy paper that talks about the challenges in fire policy. So it's a response to policy, but also independent of policy. With that, I'm ready to pass it on to my next panelist. Yeah?
Thank you so much, Carly. That's really great. So next up, we have Denise Martinez.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I just want to take a moment and say thank you to Ms. Sonora, who gets to play before their presentation, I love. So my name's Denise Martinez. I'm, like Carolyn said, a PhD candidate at UC Davis. I'm a descendant of Tutunacu people from Veracruz, Mexico. And I moved to the United States when I was 5. I'm an immigrant here. And growing up in a fire-prone Northern California, I learned a lot about fire, but what I learned was that fire was scary. And so when we started connecting with the Indigenous communities there, I learned, the Karuk and Shasta folks really taught me my first fire lessons. And they also taught me to come home to myself and to my Indigenous identity in a way that I wouldn't have been able to do without their help. So fire really has a special place in my heart. And so that's a little bit more about my connection to fire. But to introduce you a little bit to my work, so for my dissertation, I'm really focusing and taking a deep dive into collaborations between agencies, institutions, researchers, and tribes, and really trying to understand power dynamics within that relationship, and talking and doing interviews with cultural fire practitioners throughout the state that are sharing with me how they navigate things like intellectual property, knowledge sovereignty, how they navigate power, funding, trade-offs. And so I've gotten a really rich perspective, I think, and I'm really excited to share more about that. But it's still in progress. I'm still in my PhD, haven't finished. So I'm excited to learn more still.
Thank you so much, Denise. All right, next up we have Will Madrigal.
William Madrigal Jr. I wanted to always start off my presentations with acknowledging my relatives the local folks here at this land, the native folks, the Tongva, Fernandeño Tataviam. If any of you are present, thank you for allowing us to be here and work and to share and collaborate on your homelands. And we hope that what we're doing today is also a benefit to you in some way. But I introduced myself in my Cahuilla language. Cahuilla and Luceño, California Indian. Those tribes are found in what is now known as Riverside County and San Bernardino County. And I'm also a PhD student at UC Riverside in Native American Studies. But I'm here today representing the Climate Science Alliance, a nonprofit based in San Diego that does a lot of support work and collaboration with indigenous tribes when it comes to wrapping our heads around this climate change issue and addressing these climate change disparities. The Climate Science Alliance has been around for about 7 years now. Our mission is to, of course, safeguard natural and human communities from climate change, but also increase awareness, promote solutions, and facilitate action. And that's the key. Facilitating action for us is our passion, putting things into motion, GSDing, if any of you are familiar, getting stuff done. And I'm proud to be a part of the organization.
Thank you. Thank you, Will. Really appreciated your perspectives as a practitioner as well as a researcher and a teacher. Now we have our final panelist, and Nina Fontana, come on up.
Hi, my name is Nina Fontana. I am a postdoc working in association with the USGS Southwest Climate Adaptation Science Center and UC Davis. And in my postdoc, I'm exploring what traditional fire and cultural burning look like in the face of climate change and what it will look like in the face of climate change. And so I want to bring us back to why we're here and the importance of all of these initiatives that my colleagues talked about, whether it's Melinda's work and leading indigenous-led interagency burns, or Denise's work looking at equitable decision-making and frameworks that utilize environmental justice goals. Will's work, so much work, with the wildland fire training, among all of the other ones that he mentioned. This is sort of the tip of the iceberg. And it's really, really important because it informs research, science, and initiatives at a national level. And so the big question that I'm working on with 6 other postdocs is to create a national synthesis based on this question: how are the sociocultural and biophysical contexts for fire stewardship being affected by climate change? And all of us know, and all of us have been hearing about climate change in the last day, and thinking about how this context is going to impact indigenous communities who are at the front line of climate change impacts. They are also the same communities that are leading the way in mitigating a lot of these impacts. And so it really does matter to include these voices in this discussion. And so one of the outcomes, though, that we are forwarding is the adoption of a climate adaptation menu for Southwest tribes. So it would be looking at regional climate change data, including monitoring and specific projections to craft tribal-specific adaptation plans. in response to all the local and regional climate change impacts. And so our hope is that we're going to be able to address some of the opportunities and barriers for implementing Indigenous-led burning in order to promote equitable adaptation of ecosystems and human communities. Happy to talk more. I know we're running a little bit behind, though.
Thank you, Nina. Really appreciate that. All right. So with that, we're just going to hear a little bit more about some perspectives that our group put together, some questions to bring about some of these perspectives, dig in a little deeper. The first question is, how might agencies begin to engage with Indigenous communities to get more fire on the ground? And we'll start with Denise.
Yeah, this was something that came up in our in my talk with the science advisory panel, because there's a lot of agency scientists as well on that panel, and I think that there's a big focus on acreage and getting a quantitative big land base to burn. And I definitely feel that. I think that there's a big pressure to work on a lot of acres. But we also have to think long term, and I think that for me, the real value of working with Indigenous communities isn't always about acres. And, sometimes because of land tenure in California, tribes might not have access to burn a lot of land. But what they do is they build these huge collaboratives, they build community, they build adaptive capacity in the way that regions can make decisions. Because now, like if you have some place like Ron Good, there's multiple agencies, decision makers, researchers, community members, all working together year after year. So when there is a crisis, when there is decisions that need to be made about management, decisions can happen quicker in a more equitable way because there's relationships there. And so I really try to emphasize that it's important to not just look at the acres, but look at the relationships and the way that partnerships with tribes might not always, have hundreds and hundreds of acres, but they do create these regional, adaptive communities that are really important for our capacity to respond to crisis, climate change, and just getting a lot of work done. It's a lot of work. So, yeah.
Great. Thanks, Denise. Melinda, do you want to add a little bit there?
Yeah, thank you. So I think in order to get more fire on the ground, there's certainly a lot of initiatives that tribes are leading. We heard and saw pictures yesterday of the TREX events, the training exchanges in Yurok and Karuk that are leading the way. So they're providing some powerful models of how not just CAL FIRE, but Forest Service, Environmental Protection Agency, in collaborative efforts to get burn plans written and streamlined. And as was said earlier, those relationships, I think I've worked on multiple burn plans and trying to schedule for multiple burns. And the thing that helps the most is knowing those contacts and having them out to actually burn with you. So I think it's powerful to be able to establish those good relations and be able for people who are helping with the burn plan understand the cultural objectives, because they differ. And if anything, the practitioners that we all work with, they want to emphasize that what they do is very different. And Ron wanted me to make sure that people know that we're not trying to scorch earth here, which a lot of prescribes or controlled, not necessarily scorched, but they're higher intensity. And so what we do takes a little bit more time and effort and planning and prepping. I think Will had a really good picture of a prepped burn pile. All of that takes time, and I know time is urgent because of climate change, but we also want to make sure we're being thoughtful and methodical about how we're placing this fire to the ground to capture those long-term and sustainable goals. So TREX activities, prescribed burn networks, and also working with tribes to eliminate the barriers and burn plans, but most importantly, trust our practitioners. The first picture that I had yellows on, but no helmets and no pack. That makes a lot of agency peoples nervous, and I understand, but also understand we have practitioners with decades and generations of how to light to good fire and how to do it safely. And I've been on burns where they said, where they've said, we haven't had anyone get hurt yet, and we're not going to, because we have children out who burn with us. We have elders out who burn with us. It's intergenerational lessons that are done with the safety and mindfulness to protect our community members. So trust our practitioners that they know how to do this safely.
Thank you both so much. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Carly?
Hello, everyone. Okay, I just wanted to add a little bit from that, the Karuk Good Fire paper, and they talk about changing agency culture. So having that innovation and that openness to look at some of those practices, policies that ensure fire suppression, just kind of looking at other ways and being open to changing agency culture. And so I don't have like a program or a framework for that, but I think that's really critical to say right here.
Terrific. And so really kind of what I'm hearing here is that there's a millennia, there's time immemorial that of knowledge that is being drawn upon. Of course, today, the fires that we're seeing are gigantic and severe. But indigenous practitioners, knowledge holders, have worked in this space so long that if we can, combine these sort of approaches, change the culture together, we might be in a better position to deal with the challenges ahead. So next question, I'll put to Nina first, is what is your advice to researchers that want to do community-based research with indigenous communities?
I think there's lots of advice probably bursting from this panel, so I'll offer just a few. I think the first piece of advice, I think, with the type of training that I had, which is in ecology and then branching off into a more qualitative approach, is inclusion of the community in all aspects of the project itself. From the beginning, which is the question that you're asking or the question that you think you're asking. Sometimes that question that you think is important may not be important to the community. And so really asking, is this important? Because this is what the data sets say. What do you say? And really listening. So that would be one piece of advice. Second that I would offer is that communities have their own strengths, their own units of identities and knowledge systems, and really lean into those strengths. Really lean into and leverage that in your research. And the last, maybe not piece of advice, but just a note, takes a really long time. Community-based research is not quick. Takes time to build trust. And I think that I learned that in my PhD research. It takes time.
Thanks, Nina. Melinda, or got something to add?
Yeah, and I guess along with it takes time, I think I'm really practical about it with early career researchers specifically, because I think sometimes we get the advice to not do community-based research until we've gotten tenure or like are otherwise very established in our careers. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I mean, I'm doing community-informed research, and I think that one of the things that's really helped me is identifying support structures. So if you're trying to get a master's or are trying to, go through your PhD more quickly, you can work with an advisor or a program that has really establish connections to community so that you can build relationships and plug into a project and you're not just like a stranger that nobody knows. And then I think, ultimately for me, I'm not established in my career yet, but I think for me it's been so important to do this work because it feeds my soul and I feel grounded and cared for by the community I work with. And if I didn't have that, I don't know that I would love being in a graduate program. And so I think whatever makes you happy is really important. And I guess I say that because I've heard so many earlier career researchers say that people more established in their field told them not to do community-based research. So just adding to what Nina said.
Great. And I would just add that something that I lead with that I learned from community-faced researchers that are in the science realm. Community members made it clear that because of historic wrongdoings and research-related miscommunications with Indigenous peoples and Native communities, she said, we've been researched to death. We've been researched on to death. And now we are researching ourselves back to life. So really putting ourselves forward and moving forward initiatives and collaborations is important. It's one thing to invite people at the very last minute for whatever grant you're working on or whatever research you're trying to get off the ground. It's quite another to engage in those conversations beforehand, asking permission at each stage of progression, which, as we learned, takes time and care, as it should. Missing in that relationship. And then also rethinking the language that you're using. One of the methodology books that was referenced earlier, it says we need to move from doing research on or for to doing research with and by Indigenous and Native communities. And those little nuances go such a long way in building the partnerships and maintaining good relations. Last that I could kind of conceptualize, because even as a Native person myself, I work with communities that are other than my own. So I am a guest and I act as such. So my best piece of advice that I could offer is to try to be a good guest and really remember that there's ancestral homelands no matter where you are in what we call the United States, and there are vibrant Native communities that hold on to and adapt those knowledges that have sustained our lifeways, like we said, since time immemorial. So remembering to be a good guest and have good relations is the best way that I can conceptualize that.
Carly, yeah. Thank you, Melinda.
Just have a little bit to add. I'm just thinking about the podcast I shared with you and some quantitative. Our fellowship was a year. It was with the Southwest CAS and USGIS. And one of our fellows had a relationship working with Karuk Department of Natural Resources, I think for about 3 years. And then the Southwest CAS had been working with Karuk for, actually, I don't know how long. Do you know?
A number of years with the Northwest CAS, yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share that there had been long-term relationships and trust established between the agency and the tribe at that time.
Great. Thank you all. So now I think what we're going to do is wrap up our panel discussion with a question that I know the Climate Science Alliance likes to use with their groups and convenings. We enjoy this too, to bring kind of a positive spin to this work. And in the context of climate change, I want to ask each of you to share what brings you hope. And so we'll start, how about with Carly?
What brings me hope is Sonora Victoria going out to the cultural burns with us. And for real, I was pregnant with her when she first went out. So recognizing the generations to come are here and excited about this work. What else brings me hope? I think there's more. There's generations of prayers that have been praying for our land, our food, our medicine, and our water. That brings me hope. And the openness of my colleagues and my fellowship and these young scholars that are coming up and and seasoned researchers as well who are excited about innovation and I call it community building, and sometimes people use the word stakeholder engagement. So that, I think, brings me hope.
Just definitely having Sonora here, you could literally see the hope and resiliency. So I would say, I think I tried to share this with Carolyn yesterday. There's a lot of doom and gloom statistics, a lot that we learned from yesterday with climate change. And I said earlier, the burden is being carried by the next generation that we like to think of ahead of times, at least 3 generations, 7 generations ahead. And so what I shared with Carolyn was we have to have hope. As a Native person in this space, the space that I take up in the different work that I'm involved in, I have to leave with hope, because my ancestors led with hope. My ancestors who survived climate change and environmental degradation and entire worlds being taken away violently. They didn't just survive, they're still here. And so what I shared was, who am I to lead with anything other than hope, if that's in my lineage and that's what I carry for my son and his son and sons after? My ancestors survived, and who am I to question leading with anything other than hope?
Yeah, I think I would echo what Melinda said and really add that just hope is a practice. And I think that for me, looking at the immense amount of work we have to do, both in policy, science, management, it can be overwhelming, but it's also a huge opportunity to change, to heal, to really unroot or to take out by the roots things like white supremacy and settler colonialism. Because of this immense change that's happening, we have an opportunity to change the way our society functions. And we need to do that to probably address climate change. And so that gives me hope, because it's an opportunity. And like Melinda said, our ancestors made it through changes like that. And not only did they make it, but they created new ways of being. They created new ways to support future generations. They created new science. And so now it's our turn. Sonora and other little ones that are with us at the fire, I'm so inspired by them, and I learned so much from them. And I think that just having young people, and having them there and giving their perspectives makes me feel like they're so far ahead of all of us. And so I'm just so excited.
Yeah. Could you actually hand the mic over to Will? Will, we'd like to hear what gives you hope.
Yeah, real quick. What gives me hope? I know that, in our work with tribes and the Climate Science Alliance, that's what we lead with. We want their voices, their concerns, office to lead the work, to lead the project planning, implementation, design. But what are their hopes for the future? They always go back to, in our traditional way, the 7th generation. So we are, responsible as human beings living now for the next 7 generations to ensure that there is a futurity, if you will. And so that's what drives me in this work and gives me climate hope, gives me hope for a better future, a future where we can collaborate more in these spaces. We can take these concepts and things that we talk about here in this room and put them into practice and implement those things and get good fire back to the ground and in our indigenous homelands. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Nina, did you want to add?
Real quick. The first thing that came to my mind was hearing that after a particular burn this past season on Chairman Ron Good's property, there were species that came up that hadn't been there for years and years and years as a result of the cultural burns on that land. And that to me was very, very hopeful. And it just reminds, this work is very connective, and connection always brings me hope. When I see that there's connection from the past to the present and the present to the future.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And I think it goes without saying, what gives me hope is this collection of early career researchers and practitioners who are really leading the charge, particularly in California and beyond, for doing this good work, doing the good fire work. I also would like to thank Brendan for setting us up so well. Really appreciate that. And Amy with her podcast from Canada. Clearly this work is happening around the world. It's so important. And I think that it's very clear that going forward, if there's one thing we can all sort of take home, if you're a fire manager, practitioner, researcher, policymaker, is that we're in this together. And to really face these unprecedented challenges that we're seeing today on the ground, we need to look back over history, and we need to support and renew the good work that Indigenous peoples with fire and other traditional practices can bring to bear for multiple objectives: ecological, fuels reduction, and cultural. So with that, I just want to thank IAWF, Joaquin, and everyone for being here and your time. And let's give a big round of applause for these great early career researchers. All right, thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. We want to put out a special thanks to the International Association of Wildland Fire for allowing us to put this out there on the podcast, and also a special thanks to all of the speakers. So Melinda, Carly, Nina, Denise, Will, and the moderator, Carolyn. So thank you for allowing us to do that. That was, it was really cool for us to listen to and to kind of get the perspectives out there. It's a good way to get some rapid fire perspectives, you know? We only get 10 episodes. That's 10 perspectives. We got 5 in one episode. So this is good. I like it. Awesome.
Yeah. I love I just love hearing them talk about fire and what it means to themselves and their communities. It's really the future. So thanks to them. Super proud of the work that they're all doing.
Yeah. Okay. Next episode, we're going to Guyana to speak to some folks over there. Once again, unfortunately, I was unable to make this one. So Amy handled this one on her own. And there were unfortunately, some technical difficulties, but we worked our way through it.
Yeah, that's what happens when someone, unfortunately, has to commute like 6 hours just to get internet for the recording. So anyways, we'll talk about it in the next episode, but it was amazing. So it was Nicholas and Kayla who are working there, and it was a great episode.
Yeah, cool to get some more perspectives from around the world, right? So, all right, that's it. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for listening. A huge thank you to Canada Wildfire for their support of this podcast. As well, we would like to thank the Fighting Gunda Jamara for allowing us to share their fire song Ween as the official song of Good Fire Podcast.